Hello, optimizers. This is JJ Ruskan's human optimization strategist. And this is Optimizing Me, the podcast where I invite top performers from different industries to talk about their stories, their trajectories, mostly their mindset. And in this special episode, my friends Hannah and Marina here with me.
Hi.
I'm going to ask you girls to do an introduction in a little bit. And just to give a context for the audience, we just came back from a 10-day Silent Vipassana Retreat. And it's turning to be a 12-day brainstorm. We're going to talk about later. And so we the three of us have received so many requests to talk about how was our experience that we said, why not combining our insights and dissecting it from the objective to the subject? So let's give it a little bit of background first of who are, in my case, people know where I'm from, for what's my trajectory, but I would like also to get you girls introduced.
Yeah.
Marina?
Sure. So I'm Marina. I do very similar work to JJ, which is how we've been friends for now 7 months or so here in Austin. I also guide breathwork. I've taught corporate workshops around wellness, yoga, mindfulness, breathwork, other kind of health, nervous system topics. So that's what I do.
Thanks, Marina. Welcome to the show, Hannah.
My name is Hannah, and I work with women specifically, and I mentor them to step into more freedom in their life in terms of health and mindset.
Yeah.
So in the wellness.
Even though we are facing to the camera, we're going to have the conversation between mostly between us, all the other way. So now let's start with defining what's a silent retreat. What is a Vipassana silent retreat, to be more specific?
Yeah. Well, I think the important thing to know is that Vipassana itself is a very specific tradition, right? So while there's many meditation retreats in the world, there's many even silent meditation retreats in the world, the one that we finished just now is the 10-day Vipassana retreat. And 10 days is that standard amount of time that the traditional Vipassana practice follows. And Vipassana is a Buddhist tradition. This is what Buddha essentially brought to the world 2,600 years ago. And I do think that it's impressive that the practice has been as well preserved as it is, which we'll talk about. But in summary, Vipassana is spent completely in silence. It is traditionally done over the course of these 10 days. And the retreat that we participated in is in the Goenka tradition. So that's important to mention because this is the largest retreat center kind of body is in the Goenka tradition all across the world. There's, I want to say like 30 centers across North and Latin America, and then many in Europe and Asia as well.
3 or 300?
30 in North and Latin America, and then 300 all over the world. And the tradition, the Goenka tradition is kind of very specific to this one person, Goenka himself, who brought it to the West, I want to say in the 60s. So he's often quoted as one of the big authorities who introduced America and the rest of the world outside of India to mindfulness. But it is not, according to my research now, coming out of it, it's not the only place that you can practice Vipassana. So there are
Which is
other...
good to note.
Yes.
Because I'm thinking, 10-day silent meditation retreat, and like there are different ones.
Yes. Yeah. And even in the Vipassana tradition specifically, there are other retreat centers where you can find and practice Vipassana. It might just take some research with that. But yeah.
Now, just to clarify also to the people, we went to Kaufman, Texas, which is 3 hours and a half away from Austin. Yeah. We did it because obviously it was the closest to us, but there are, as you mentioned, many other ones, right?
Yeah. And that was a really nice one also. Like we had our own, just for like a bit of the setup, we all had our own little dorm rooms, which is a nice asset to it. But as far as the 10 days goes, we were supposed to not have technology for 10 days, not have any human contact. So we're walking around. There's probably around 100 people there, would you say? And we're all looking down, not supposed to look at each other, not supposed to touch anyone, make any contact. There was a very specific eating schedule. It's all plant-based and there's no dinner, essentially. So that's a big part of it as well. What else would you say were the...
Yeah. So I think that the structure, so for anyone who's like curious, like what happens on a daily basis, it is very structured, right? So there's a very specific progression, morning to evening. So there's a morning bell that goes off in the dorms at 4 a.m. And the first meditation begins from 4:30 to 6:30 a.m. Now, what I appreciated about this is there is a little bit of flexibility, especially if you have your own room. So I mostly slept through that morning alarm. In full transparency, catching up on sleep was really important to me going into the retreat. So I skipped that first morning meditation. But after that, you're pretty much on a set schedule with everyone else. So by 8 a.m., you have your first main meditation with all the participants in the hall. So you have your dorm space and then you have the main meditation hall where all 100 participants or however many there are meditating together with the presence of the male and female teachers there as well. Something else about the structure is that men and women are separated for the duration of the program. So while Hannah and I would be in the same space, we couldn't talk, look at each other, or hug. And I saw JJ maybe like 3 times over the course of the 10 days. So it does kind of remain very separated. So there's the 8 a.m. morning meditation in the hall. It's an hour long. Then breakfast happens before that. So you have a light breakfast. Then you have the morning meditation. And then you have, what I did appreciate is that there's small breaks between all the long meditation stretches. So after a 1 hour sit, you usually have at least a 10-minute break. So that is nice because you want to stretch your body out. But then after that, there's pretty much just meditating and lunch and small breaks for the remainder of the day. So essentially, if you follow the retreat structure as it's designed, you're meditating from about 4:30 to about 7:30 every day. And something else that's important about the retreat structure that I think none of us were aware or were aware to the extent of it is that there's an evening discourse, meaning that at the end of the day, every day ends with listening to about an hour and a half of teachings discourse by Goenka. So before he passed, he recorded himself. And so every day ends with about an hour and a half of instruction on Buddhist teachings, which I really enjoyed. It was more so the delivery that we'll go into as well, but just touching on structure, you're meditating pretty much most of the day. You have that evening discourse. You have breakfast and lunch. You do skip dinner. You just have tea or fruit. And that's meant to support people with going deeper into their meditative practice, is having really light meals and eating really light for the duration of the 10 days. And then you end the day with another brief meditation with everyone in the hall. And then it's essentially you're back in your dorm and it's lights out by 9:30, 10 every single day.
Other 2 things to mention is that they encourage to avoid reading, writing, and basically consuming or creating any type of mental prompt, right? And also even moving, basically not even exercising, because there's a space outside for walking. It doesn't say for exercise, which in my case, I said, no way, I need to move my body. So I would, in my room, I would do some push-ups, I would do some stretches, like constantly. I was doing that in the morning as well. I was doing that.
Yeah. And I think it's important to mention that we're all pretty rebellious, like us being friends and knowing ourselves, right? We kind of push the structure just a little bit. But if someone were to follow this to a T, like a lot of people are asking me like, well, you read, right? Or like you did this or you did that. Truly, if you are signing up for this tradition and these specific Goenka retreat centers, there's the expectation that you are pretty much meditating, eating, or walking. There's really not a whole lot that happens for 10 days.
Yeah, which is, I would say that is the monk life. That's the life of a monk. And with this notion of not, or having the vow of not talking is what we call noble silence. It's called noble silence. And now one thing to tell people is that noble silence was, I would say, 99% of the time, obviously followed, but there were moments when there were times where you can connect or ask questions with the teacher. That doesn't mean that you have to We're going to talk about that as well. Had something there. But if there is a question that arises from one of the participants, they can go and talk to the assistant teacher. And it's important to mention what you said. There is a male assistant teacher and a female assistant teacher. So the duration goes there. And also the title of assistant teacher, because they would say, this is not a retreat that we are teaching. It is Mr. Goenka that is teaching. And so like, interesting.
It is interesting. Let's talk about the vows that we take.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The 3 gems. That's what they call the 3 gems. So the 3 gems were Shila, Samadhi, and Prajna.
Yes.
Anyone would like to talk about it?
But I think first it's important to mention they say Vipassana is secular. They're not identifying with any religion, and everyone is welcome, completely secular. However,
what we found is that, over the course of the retreat, obviously, and again, if someone is truly preparing for a completely secular experience, this is a Buddhist tradition, right? And I think that right away is important to mention. So if anyone, I myself love Buddhism. I read about it. I've been in mindfulness for many, many years. So I love that. For me, it would feel more authentic to call this a Buddhist retreat. Right.
To just come call it what it is.
Yeah. And many of the words that, right, JJ just said, like the Shila, the Prajna, the Samadhi, those are Buddhist concepts that you are invited into when you step foot into the retreat space, right? And there's certain things that you vow to uphold for the duration of the 10 days. So they were the noble silence, so no eye contact, no speaking, no writing, no communication, unless it's with the assistant teacher or the manager who is available. If you do have questions around you need something, you forgot something, something's coming up for you, you can speak to someone very briefly on that. But other than that, you're upholding noble silence. There's the vow to abstain from all sexual activity. There is the vow to
Not lying,
no lying,
not killing anything that is alive.
not killing, and
That's which I had a little bit of an issue.
because you had ants in your room. It is funny how those get in the way. What's the 5th vow?
Need to remember it.
Okay. No noble
Not
silence.
killing. So not killing. That's so noble silence, not killing, not lying, no sexual activity, not intoxicants.
That's right. Nothing that would alter your mental state.
Yeah. Because it's gonna already get altered.
Exactly.
So you step into those vows on day 1. You also give up your technology, so your phone, your laptop, whatever valuables you have. And you're kind of at that point left to your own devices, your own mind, and the practice of meditation.
Literally. So as Marina mentioned, we have a structure that was basically copy paste 95% of the entire time. So for me, and at some point it turned into Groundhog Day. Like the mind starts just getting, so here we go again. We do it. Now, what's the next the other 3 gems? So we talked about Shila, which are those five vows. Then we have Samadhi and Prajna. So Samadhi.
So to me, Samadhi, I'd be curious how you would define it, but
I was a rebel. I tuned it out.
so my understanding of Samadhi in general, even from yoga and also yoga teachings, which is of course a separate, practice in itself with similar overlaps, but Samadhi is the reaching of quote unquote enlightenment. But to me, that just means peace of mind, right? A quieting of the mind and seeking insight, right? It's seeking greater insight. And, I think everyone has different goals for why they would go through something like this in the first place. I had my goals, you had your goals, right? Everybody does. But I think overarchingly, why humans are drawn to a transformational experience like this, as well as many others that we've done so many different things, right? Breath work, Tony Robbins, so many things, is the seeking of that insight, right? And I think there's truth and untruth to a lot of that, right? I think in modern day society, we're not really set up to go inward. So I think the removal of stimuli, of technology, of contact can certainly be really, really beneficial to a point. And at the same time, what I'm realizing and becoming present to is when we place that achievement of insight on such a pedestal that we really prioritize it and seek it, right? I think it's that seeking that I sometimes really want to be mindful of. It's Did I take this on and say yes to doing a 10-day silent meditation retreat in order to gain some new insights? Yes. And as I'm integrating, it's also about like taking a step back and being like, I don't always have to be in that pursuit either. So, but that's what samadhi means to me.
So this thing what you're saying brings me to also think about any kind of modern practice to endure the body. For example, cold plunging. Cold plunging is also a mental game, right? I remember with my business partner, Dr. Wendy, helping me on the research. For example, I took her to do cold plunge with me. I said, Wendy, this is going to be like this. I need you to breathe like this. First 20 seconds, she yelled at me, she cursed me, and she went out of that. But then I said, just focus on this thing. I need you to control the mind. And coming back out into samadhi, I'm going to make a detour. And then once she got it there and she started following the rhythm of the breath, she followed that. She was able to control her mind. So she went from not even 30 minutes to being able, 30 seconds to being able in a cold plunge to 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Huge difference. Now, going back to samadhi, for me, it was what they call it, the mastery of the mind. And this is key. And we're going to talk about this because in my case, I realized that the moment that there was no stimuli coming in or that I could express, what I call it, when my mouth got shut, my mind went wild. At some point, I don't know if I told you, but at some point I thought I was yelling and screaming when I was sitting on the meditation. I could feel the inner sensation as when I yell, but nothing was happening outside, right? Otherwise, I would have been kicked out to the basement.
What day did that happen?
Multiple days.
Okay.
Multiple days.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the third one is panya. So panya is, so far it's very theoretical. Shila, samadhi, yeah, makes sense. But panya for me was interesting. And I'm using those terms to give a new label to concepts that in English or in Spanish I was not able to find. So panya is the actual visceral practice of something, not just theoretical, but getting immersed into something. And there is this proverb, the African proverb that says, knowledge is an illusion and it lives in the muscle. So this is a practical way to do that. One of the things that personally I loved about the retreat, and yeah, I would say I loved it. It was like, it was not theoretical. We went straight into the practice of enlightenment. There was step to step. Now, if we found it or not, that's different. There were a clear, practical way to do so.
I could see how your brain and how you operate would appreciate like the step-by-step structure. And I do appreciate that too. I think we wanted to touch maybe a little bit on like the progression, right, over the course of the 10 days. And I do appreciate that as well, where it is very structured, highly structured actually, not just with the schedule of the day, but also what actually happens day by day. So days 1 through 3, obviously for many people are like this arrival space, right, where we're just learning to tune off and turn off everything, all the stimuli. So the first 3 days are starting out with breath awareness. You're observing and focusing on the breath. And to me, that was a way to really just start to get into a calmer pattern in my body before you can start to notice like the deeper layers, the deeper insights, the deeper emotions that the body wants to send. The first goal is just to turn off the stimulation. There's no phone, there's no inputs, there's no news, there's nothing, right? And I did find that those 3 days were necessary. It was really on day 4 that the whole hall starts to become like actually quiet. Before that, there's a lot of shifting, coughing, scratching, right? Movement that's happening even during those like concentrated hours of meditating in the large meditation hall. On day 4, I did find a lot more quiet. So I agree with how those 3 initial days are meant to be that kind of arrival into it. Then from there, the practice evolves where you begin to meditate on the body and on the bodily sensations. And first you start on the surface of the body, so you can quite literally notice like your scalp, your skin, the bottoms of your feet, right? You go top to bottom. And that is also something that I appreciate about this, because I think a lot of times meditation in modern world is portrayed as being really difficult or seen as really difficult because we are so mind focused. And for many people who are not trained in this, well, the mind is going to immediately start to go off and open up tabs and think of thoughts. And that's where, for a lot of people I've worked with before, like that's where the meditation ends for them and they check out and say, this is not for me. So I actually appreciate that the Vipassana tradition asks us to pay attention to the body, what's going on the surface, And then eventually what's also going on inside, internally in the viscera of the body. And I really like that progression. And then you actually end with a day of loving kindness meditation where you send love to others. I would have wanted a lot more on that, a lot more instruction on that, because I love loving kindness meditation. It's, metta meditation, and I've been practicing it for years. But that's essentially like that structure that you mentioned. Like there's actual tools in achieving that enlightened state. I also liked how it was laid out that way.
And how was it for you, the progression? Do you remember? Can you explain?
You read my mind. So it's interesting because obviously, probably not coincidentally, my progression progressed exactly like starting on the surface of the body, and then we go deeper into the body over the course of the 10 days. And that's exactly what happened for me with the mind. It would start out almost like my thoughts are surface level, and I'm just like getting there. And the first 3 days I'm gonna be like, oh, this is easy, whatever. And I'm still kind of just like thinking about the last week of my life. And then as it goes on and you have no input and you're going deeper into the body, deeper into the subconscious, my thoughts get deeper, my feelings get deeper, my emotions get deeper, and I'm going like deeper and deeper into my psyche. So I feel like it works literally hand in hand with the progression of the meditation.
One of the things, I don't know if I told you this, but as Marina mentioned, the part Anapana is a first technique, which is focusing on this triangle part of the nostrils and the upper lip, right? And I was doing it over and over again until I got this memory that I had a scar right there when I was learning how to walk. And the scar is still there. So I started getting memories around that. I don't know if they were real memories, but they were physiological response for that, right?
Yeah.
And obviously those memories brought, for example, emotions were. So that was the first part. And then what you said, Marina, is like, okay, we started moving. Now, one of the things that I need to mention, and it is because of, this is my theory, the power of suggestion. What do I mean? People are focused on this part. People are focused only on that upper, or on that triangle. But by day 3 in the discourse, that is when Goenka says, now at this moment, you're starting to feel sensations, some tingling sensation, and you start introducing the labels around that. And so therefore a person's like, oh yeah, I'm feeling that, of course, because they have brought awareness to that, which is genius, right? It's the same thing when we are living breathwork. If I say, okay, if you feel tension or if you feel like parts of your body feel tingly, you can move. And that's when a person thought, oh yeah, they start doing something, right? Because their awareness was somewhere else. So that part was very interesting.
I want to touch on that too. It's interesting. We didn't talk about this. I agree that also throughout the retreat, I'll just say it, you're in a trance almost 100% of the time eventually. By day 4, because of the sheer volume of how much you are meditating, you're meditating up to 10 hours a day. And that means that even when you're at lunch, even when you're walking, when you're waking up, when you're brushing your teeth, you get into such a slow brainwave state almost 100% of the time. Like I found myself like kind of losing my balance. Like carrying my food by day 7 was strange. I was like unbalanced, unfocused. And it's good, right? In a way, it's also good to be in such a relaxed state in the mind and the body. So there's benefits to that as well. But it is interesting because we are highly suggestible when we're in a slower brainwave state, we're in a trance-like state. And so, of course, when, there's discourse, there's teachings, when Goenka is sharing things with you at the end of the day, you are much more receptive to being agreeable. And in my, understanding of the human body and the psyche, which I've been in the space for many years, it really sinks straight into your subconscious. And again, this doesn't necessarily have to be good or bad without labeling it that way. It's just for me about everyone being aware of what's actually happening to you when you take on something like this, right? 10 days of meditating, 10 hours a day. What is something I would label as good from the technique that you're saying, right? As we hear, oh, you're going to start noticing subtler sensations on the body. You're going to start to notice like energy and tingling. I think the benefit there from the tradition is that we are learning how to get out of reactivity to the larger things in life, getting into the more nuanced sensations. I think many of us are really overactive. We react to alarms, noises, notifications, sounds, right? That is how we are designed. We're always in that mode of I'm going to react to a loud noise or something that needs my attention. And through the quieting of the mind and the progressive technique, first you're noticing the larger things that your body has to say, like you're noticing hunger, you're noticing an itch, you're noticing thirst, right? You're noticing discomfort, pain. And then over time, I would say by day 7, 8, 9, you do start to notice subtle things like air touching your skin, energy running through the body, different energetic sensations like the bottoms of your feet, right? And the benefit there, and this is what I always invite people into in meditation in general, we don't meditate just to meditate, right? We don't do this practice to get good at the practice. We do it to get better at life. And I think the benefit there is I become less reactive to large stimuli. And so I can be more in tune with my actual internal state and the subtle sensations, the subtle nuances of life.
That's an interesting point that you mentioned, to become less reactive to the big stimuli. In this case, it was become less reactive to the minute stimuli, which at the neurological perspective, maybe that's the reason we act out some behaviors, because there are some minute changes at physiological state that create this massive reaction.
Yeah.
And we are unaware of those ones. It's like if we would have such a tiny, let's say called una astilla. I don't know how to say it. It's like a pin, yeah, like small pin that is in your foot, in your foot, and you're stepping on it, and you're going crazy. Like, what's happening? You're taking medicine over here, and you're going to one or the other thing, and you don't realize that little thing is wreaking havoc in the entire system.
Well, and that was one of the points that he made, is that the bigger sensations or the bigger things that happen to us in life, there's a root behind all of that. And the root is the smaller sensations. The root is the subconscious, if you will. And so it's almost like what you're saying is like, it is when we become more non-reactive from a root level, that's the application.
Yeah.
And just to your point of, as a pro, as something that I would label as really good that I took away from it and that I think is really powerful, is in that stillness, the ability to connect, in order to connect to those subtle sensations, strengthening that connection to your body, which strengthens your connection to your intuition, to all of the wisdom that your body has to offer, and just be the acuity and the sharpness that my mind was able to develop to those sensations and to my body is something that I'm taking with me, and that I think was a really, really powerful application from it, like practical application that can only be derived from sitting still and being able to tune in that deeply to your own body.
Yeah. I think overall, the two main kind of goals and outcomes that Vipassana looks to leave people with, which again, I think of as good things that we want to be mindful of, is getting out of the pattern of reactivity. So like I'm always in reactionary mode, I'm always on high alert, and getting into like the deeper desires that we have, the emotions that we can actually be present with. And then the other one is really being aware of when we're either craving or are having an aversion to something.
And I want to talk about so that's a good point. I was writing that down because the essence was, for me, and now going more into the philosophical aspect, it has been the, as we said, the awareness of reactivity. Now, when you say this one, this thing of stopping or not getting into craving and avoiding aversion. So I showed the diagram. The diagram I have been sharing with so many people, the 4 quadrants, and all of them like, oh, here. So, and I gotta think we're gonna add it as bonuses for the podcast. But in essence, the not going castle, not Vipassana, but Buddhism, but there is the root of all misery or suffering is
Craving and aversion.
craving. And now the funny thing is that aversion is a type of craving. because you are. So what is craving? It's trying to find something that you don't have at this moment. Trying to get something that you don't get at this moment. The more that you crave, the more that you suffer. The bigger the craver, the bigger it's suffering, or the misery, as one can call it. Now, aversion is trying to remove oneself from a pain that we're feeling, which is basically craving for the opposite.
Yeah.
But there is not a middle ground. There's not a middle ground. So no craving, no aversion, that is actually the middle ground, because everyone goes out into, that's the reason is I'm not feeling good, I'm going to go get a drink.
Well, is the middle point equanimity?
Exactly.
Which is what we're reaching throughout the retreat.
Exactly. That was, and as Hannah mentioned, the connection that this technique does between mind and body is undeniable.
Yes.
It helps so much. And now through that connection, it's finding equanimity. How do you find equanimity?
So in like practical examples, if someone's listening and they're like, what the heck are you guys are talking about? Craving, aversion. What it could look like in an actual setting in one of your meditations is you sit down for a meditation. It's day 4. You're like, okay, I got this. You drop into, some state of observation of the body, coming back to your breath, coming back to the body. Maybe 35 minutes in, you start to notice that your knee hurts. That is an aversion. You would like the knee pain to end. And as a desire to get out of thinking about your knee pain, you start to think about how lunch is coming up. And maybe there's some delicious soup at lunch. So the aversion is switched into the craving. And then we go and bounce back and forth between those two states. It also shows up in what we're thinking about, because sure, the goal is not to think about anything, but over the course of 80 hours plus of meditating in a short amount of time, I think most of us revisited many of our thoughts, memories, woes, tragedies of life. Everything comes up. And so you notice how the brain starts to go past, future, craving, aversion. I want soup, my knee hurts. I want to switch my position. I want to itch my scalp. I wish I didn't date that person. I wish I dated this other person, right? And we're constantly in that state. So I think what you're saying is this practice is really illuminating for us to notice that that's how the mind works, right? That is the nature of the mind. And the goal, quote unquote, goal that we can hopefully achieve some semblance of by the end of this is to have some neutrality, where you can just sit in that meditation and extend the amount of time. Maybe now it's 30 minutes, maybe now it's 40 minutes, maybe now it's 50 minutes, where you're just seated and you're just coming back and noticing, I just thought about lunch, I'm not at lunch yet. Let me just come back to where I'm at.
Talking about those quadrants, what is it that you were saying? The mind is going between past and future, between craving and aversion. So just for the audience, how I see it personally is that there is a horizontal line from, this is, on the left we have the past, on the right we have the future, and right in the middle, present moment. So the mind is going into, how I call it in my terms, it is when the mind goes into the past, it's because it activated the algorithm of memory. Picking up memory. If the mind is going into the future, it's activating the memory, the algorithm of imagination. Now, that is the horizontal spectrum. In the vertical spectrum, we have up or going north, we have pleasant sensations, and going south, we have unpleasant sensations. And those directions are where from craving and aversion stem from, right? Because if something looks pleasant, we start craving it, we go up north. If there is something that is unpleasant, is in the south, we try to go up north again, right? So removing us from steps. So equanimity in my world, it is not being in the past or the future, being in the present, not being into craving or aversion, right there in the middle, which is such a big goal.
And it's a paradox, because it's all a paradox. Because as soon as you crave to be in equanimity, you're in craving. So the whole time we are striving for equanimity, but yet we are not supposed to be striving for anything. So it's this interesting balance, which is the existential piece that I think made this the most difficult. Well, I was thinking
No, that's one part, because remember, at the end of all this training, there are two main components. The first one is equanimity, and the second one is anicca.
Impermanence.
Impermanence.
The paradox. Yeah.
Exactly. So the impermanence is like everything ends. So as you mentioned, Marina, okay, there is this itch, or my back hurts. Oh my God, it's like, when is this gonna be over? And the goal is to train that this is going to pass. Or if I'm having my peanut butter, which was the best part for me of the entire retreat, once they got peanut butter, I'm like, and then I'm enjoying it, and I'm like, this is going to pass. This is ephemeral. This is impermanent, right? Like, and so that was tricky, because we started getting into deeper layers of existence, from the momentary pain and comfort or discomfort, to the understanding that every single cell in the body is dying and getting reborn, which is, by the way, part of the boat of Theseus, beautiful Greek story of how the body is continuously changing. So, and that made us question, what is identity?
Yes.
What is the animal?
That, I think, is the most challenging component, beyond being seated, beyond meditating, beyond any of these components, beyond noble silence, is the fact that meditating this long in this structure will have you face the deepest realities of life while presenting no concrete answers for them.
Answers
Without anyone to talk about it.
No support, and you are being left, because I mean, I feel like I didn't get if this happened to you guys as much, but for me, the deeper I went, the more memories surfaced. And instead of, I'm going in, and while I went in and I tried to have, like, as little expectations, I genuinely went for the experience. I think I was thinking, I know that I'm going to be able to access a deeper part of myself. What I accessed was all the pain I've ever lived. And memory after memory resurfacing, traumas, all of it being flushed to the surface, which is a gift. And again, also to note for anyone that is a common thing that happens, and you have no support. So you're re-experiencing all of your pain and suppressed memories, but yet you are left alone to process that, which again can be a good thing, and also, for me, probably the most difficult thing.
This is maybe a good place to get into, like, our experiences and, like, the outcomes and the concerns that we have.
Yes, and okay, who would like to start?
I'll start. I want to preface it with that, many people have asked us, and many people in general, I think, look to us for our opinions on transformational experiences, or what to do, right? What not to do, how to optimize, what to avoid. And my goal with this podcast, with a blog that I wrote on my website, is just to give people a better understanding before they go into these things. Because while I consider myself to be super healthy physically and mentally, there are things that I was very unprepared for, and certain things that I personally don't agree with. But I don't want that to color anyone's personal choice of whether to go or not to go. And also, the lens that I come from is a lens of harm reduction, meaning that before we seek enlightenment, quote unquote, before we engage in some of these things, we also have to know what are the risks so that we can make an informed choice, right? And I actually think that with the structure and the setting, there's a number of benefits that come up. We've already touched on many. There's also a lot of concerning things that I saw that I just wish more people could be aware of. So as far as, I hate labeling things good versus bad, but I will take that structure just for simplicity. I'll share some of the beneficial things that have been my results of the retreat, and some things that I found concerning, and then I'll let you guys chime in on yours. For me, some of the best things that came from it is really simple. Just the structure of it helped me catch up on sleep in a consistent way. So turning off stimuli, I think, is pretty much, we all can agree, is beneficial, right? Getting off social media, getting off of notifications, your laptop, like, that's just beneficial across the board. I don't think that's unique to Vipassana. That's any retreat that you can do or structure for yourself. There's going to be huge benefits of that. For me, resetting my circadian rhythm was huge. Also resetting my adrenal health. There was no caffeine that I had during the week, right? That's really personal to me. But I really welcomed that body reset. And even things like not having dinner and having really light meals for 10 days, it really was supportive of my meditations going deeper. So all of those things like body-based, health-based things, better sleep, less caffeine, light foods were really helpful in healing for my body. As a result of that, coupled with the volume of meditating, I would say that it's undeniable. My nervous system is a lot calmer. So where I've already been in the space of nervous system health, breath work, lowering my anxiety over the past 6 years, I do feel like I dropped that anxiety from like a level 4 to like a level 2. And that's been consistent for the past week. So I'm really, mindful of that, and I welcome that. Can't deny that it's been helpful for that. And then working through past like deeper buried emotions. Now, I welcome that, and this is something that others need to be mindful of, right? If you don't have the right tools or skills to work with emotions, if there is a history of trauma, right, especially very recent traumatic events, I don't think this is the right setting for someone to go in, kind of blindly throw themselves in, especially because there is no component of person-to-person integration. And JJ and I both work and have worked in the psychedelic space for a number of years, where integration is such a cornerstone to the processing of the themes that come up. I think that is one of the most challenging and, to me, concerning parts of this, is that the retreats are run by volunteers. Even the assistant teachers are volunteers, meaning there is no formal support that you can receive if you are truly going through an existential crisis. If you have a memory that's surfacing of a past traumatic event, with the lack of stimuli, we also have nothing to distract us from that surfacing. So where my mind went throughout the week is, thank God I don't have anything like this, but I can imagine people who have had traumatic events loop those memories over and over and over again, right? Without an outlet, without an ability to really reach out. Because if you speak to the assistant teacher, certainly you'll get some support, and it's better than nothing, but they'll bring you back to the technique itself, right? And that is what
Your
they
concept of anicca.
Exactly, the concept of impermanence, and that your memories will pass. However, from my kind of mental health background, there is some concern that I have of further wiring certain memories and traumatic events that can really happen, and does, if you do enough research around Vipassana and people experiencing things like psychosis as a result of it. It does happen, and I don't think it's talked about. I think it's oftentimes kind of swept under the rug. The chances are low. It's not a high chance, but it is a chance. And so that to me was concerning. So I don't think it's anyone who has a strong history of trauma or mental health issues. I don't think there's enough disclaimers around this at the front of the retreat upon arrival. There is, certain things that you fill out and share, but just the nature, again, of the volunteer-based organization is that you might slip through the cracks, right? Certain things might go unnoticed. You yourself might not fully know and be equipped with the right skills to go into something like this. So I really wanted to mention that. And then I'll touch on, beyond my aversion to Goenka himself, which I really struggle with the delivery of the discourse and certain meditations, but, that might just be personal to me. The one thing that to me seems like a huge contraindication is that the Vipassana tradition is meant to remain unchanged, and it has been unchanged for the past 2,600 years. However, and this is the paradox, the core premise that Vipassana teaches is that everything is permanent. Everything changes, everything goes through seasons of death and rebirth. And so immediately, when we were presented with that discourse about how the tradition remains as is and we do not question the
Everything
tradition,
changes except the tradition.
to me, in the modern world, I want some more flexibility. To me, it's hard to say that as humans evolve over the past 2,600 years and into the future, as our lives change, as our mindsets change, that something will hold up forever in perpetuity. I don't know. That's just something that, flared up for me in the retreat. Would like to go.
We were driving an animation that it blew your mind.
I know. It's like, wait, this is a complete contradiction with what we've just been learning about. We can't question the practice. It is how it is. We just must follow it as designed. Yeah.
What's your take on that? What's your take?
The good, the bad, the concern.
So,
Well, I was mentioning to JJ and Marina before, in everything that I do, in any process, in any experience, in any plant medicine, there's things that I disagree with and things that I agree with. And I think that even that in itself, there's value to being able to practice that muscle of this is true for me, this is not true for me. And I appreciate that. And almost always, I find that the things that I disagree with are a lot of times also what make it valuable. So things that I disagree with, being completely isolated, no human contact, not getting help, and all of these things are surfacing, I think that can be really dangerous, to your point. At the same time, for me, I was able to go deeper than I've ever gotten into memories, into healing, into my own psyche. And I don't know if that would be possible if I wasn't left to my own devices for 10 days with no verbal processing, with no one to put their input, with no external stimuli, with being, I won't say forced, but to sit still, and less of like the somatic approach. All of those things are things that I would say I have a problem with and are possibly the reason I was able to go so deep. Something that I've told multiple people is that I was able to go deeper than I'd ever gone. And I had many like very healing experiences and memories come up that I'm still processing. At the same time, I feel like it's at a very high price to pay. And so that's just the point I make. Like, I wouldn't want to discourage someone. Like, if someone, even if, no matter what someone would have told me before, my soul craved to experience this, whether I loved it or hate it. And so that's where I'm coming from. I would never tell someone like that, don't do it. But to your point of creating awareness in exactly what you're putting yourself through, because I was put to my breaking point. And by day 10, I mean, you saw, like, I was in a very bad place. And
to be like transparent, because Hannah and I were, together, just apart. I didn't actually know what JJ was experiencing. I didn't like see him very much at all, but I saw Hannah, and a big part of my experience was my concern for Hannah, because I was like, oh my God, she's a goner. Is she okay?
I was thinking the same thing about you.
She was thinking the same thing about
because also the element of we're walking around not being able to look at each other. Everyone looks very solemn. It doesn't feel like if you're thinking, oh, this is going to be a nourishing space, you're not going to the right place.
Yes.
It's very dry. The structure to me felt very masculine. And even, for example, like I was on my period. So for you, it was like the way that we were eating and all of that felt like a nourishing thing. For me, I'm thinking like my body needs more substance. And again, those things that I disagree with probably also did help me be able to go deeper. So it's always that paradox for me. At the end of the day, I had a lot come up that I think is really, really valuable at the expense of my sanity, I do feel.
I actually want to acknowledge you, because now, right, we're a week out. We came back last Sunday. It's the following Saturday now. And I think I'm so impressed and moved by you and your like resilience. And I see myself in you too, because you and I are very similar. And I'm like, gosh, we are just going to make the most of any experience. So that's also our nature. And yes, it's important to mention like how difficult this path is. In the psychedelic space, I used to actually put this path on a pedestal over what I call shortcuts, over things that deliver quicker results, such as I think if you undertake one night of, a plant medicine experience, it could yield some, maybe not all, but equal amounts potentially of insights that this 10-day, extremely strenuous, potentially lose your mind route takes you on. And so now I'm sitting with this, like, there's really probably no right versus wrong. It's just the experience that each person takes on and what your soul craves and
what you're feeling called to.
Exactly.
And could it be different times in your life? Because there's times in my life where I was feeling a lot more called to plant medicine, and I've been on a path of sobriety full sobriety for really the past 4 years of my life. And so it is interesting to compare. I don't think any is better or worse than the other. What's coming up for me as you say that is, what is sobriety though? Because I think all of us at some point experienced a psychedelic like state.
Vipassana.
Exactly. It does. It does beg this deeper conversation, because for me there is something to these memories coming up and the state that was created, whether that becomes an altered state, but from a place of sobriety, like I still created that with the help of zero stimulants. And there is something really powerful about that. There is something really powerful about that for me that I really honor and value. At the same time, again, very high price to pay. And I did tell some people, like, you're getting a lot out of doing shrooms. Spend your 6 hours of doing shrooms and save 10 days of your life and your sanity. It's an interesting conversation, because it's not about, outweighing any of the two. But I know that for probably people listening who have, are wanting in their mind to compare the experience somehow. I definitely had meditations where I had vivid memories come up. And I had one in particular where I felt like I was absolutely on LSD.
Mm-hmm. And you experienced your own birth.
I experienced my soul before it was born and it coming into the world, among many other wild experiences.
But even with breathwork, right? It's still a sober experience other than under oxygen.
Yeah.
So we have countless of people that have had massive breakthroughs through that.
Absolutely.
Right? So there's a component of substance sobriety, but there is no emotional sobriety. And the equanimity training needs to get into emotional sobriety, because when a memory pops up, it's not going to come just neutral. It comes up with a baggage of emotions. And all of those technologies are designed to.
I think that's such a good point. And it helps in the conversation of like what sobriety is. And what's interesting is with the equanimity, like for me, it was probably day 7. Well, there was some before, but day 7 was when it started happening back-to-back meditations where I would be able to reach this place. And it was as soon as I got my body into the place of, who knows what, if it was equanimity or what, but I was completely tuned out of my physical body. And as soon as I hit there, it was like these memories start coming up. And instead of going back to the technique, I'm like, this is the point that I let all of, I'm like, this is what my body wants to come up. And a reason that I kind of refrained from getting help from the teacher, which you alluded to, and maybe could have helped my experience in the end. At the same time, I didn't want them to tell me, keep going with the technique. I'm like, my body wants this to come up. And so I'm going to just allow whatever wants to come up. And that really shapes my experience.
Yeah. Well, I think also as time passes, our perception of the experience changes. So I think that if we were to record this podcast last Sunday, I would just go off on how I don't think this is a practice that anyone is fit for. I was working through a lot of that, like existential crisis about the retreat itself coming out of it.
Totally.
But now that we've had a chance to land and integrate, but this is a good point. We're changing how we relate to the experience and the outcomes of it. And again, what I just want to circle back on that is for anyone who's exploring this, who isn't in a stable place going into it, right? It's the same approach that I have with someone asking me if they should go into a retreat or a ceremony is, what is your current level of stability? Is there a lot of past grief? Is there a lot of change? Was there a loss of a job? Exactly. Some of those core things have to be in place so that you are not destabilized beyond repair.
Yes. And I want to say something quickly to your point of the process of coming back. We were in there for 10 days. So like, no doubt that like every single day that goes by, every single hour that goes by, I feel different post. And because my body's just processing so much. And I was telling Marina, it's like when you work out, your muscles are going to be sore. And that's the point of them getting stronger, right? You break them down, you feel at your weakest, you feel sore, and then they grow back together stronger. And I personally really do feel like we just all walked into a marathon with I can say not any training. And so coming out, I like felt very unstable. And I think that there were reasons for that, specifically for me, but I'm equating it to, okay, my heart, my mind, my body, all these things are sore. And I do feel myself, I do feel them growing back together stronger and stronger, because that's what happens with the breakdown. And when you fall that deep, you really have no choice but to come back stronger. But it takes time, and it takes the right support for integrating, like so that you're not stuck in that place.
Yeah. JJ, yeah, your outcomes. How are you feeling now? He seems to be processing a lot just for this conversation.
Yeah. 知道. I think that for me it was a shit show from the beginning. And by the way, you can curse in this show.
Okay, great. You tell that to us now.
I did not realize until I think the first 10 minutes how much is my maybe need or how I thrive in connection with other people. And not having that for 10 days was extreme for me. Was something that I never thought about it. And not even having the distraction of the mind on top of that. Right? Like, okay, I can have no connection with anyone, but I'm going to read my books. I'm going to do my stuff. Oh, that was it. That was one thing. Then the other thing was the mental struggle, how my mind started just playing tricks with itself, trying to how I thought it is the mind trying to grab its own tail and be spinning of suffering, whether in either of the quadrants that we talked about. Past craving, past aversion, future craving, future aversion. And it became unbearable. It became unbearable. And at some point I told you, and I don't say it from a point of a self-pity or anything, but my mind itself was into so much suffering, created by itself and for itself so much suffering, that I started having suicidal thoughts. Or the mind started creating suicidal thoughts. And if you think about it, right, it makes sense. It's a calculation. It's like, there is this much pain in this state. This other state seems to be promising with less pain. And I can see how some people can take action on that from that state. In that case, thankfully, I stepped out and I saw what was happening. Like, oh, interesting. But it was the first time ever in my life that I experienced anything like that, right? And now I feel compassion for people whose minds are playing tricks on themselves. Yes. And they think that option is better option. It's impermanent. Yeah, you're impermanent. Remember that. You're impermanent. And so that was one thing that happened for me. And obviously the other realization was the thousands of insights that I got about the lies that I've told to myself for decades. And that was very humbling, like looking at my own shit in the face and not being able to move anywhere. That was very, very tough. And at the same time, I am grateful for that. No plant medicine has shown me that in that regard. Or maybe it was not the time to show me that. Who knows at this moment? It's not that, oh, if you want to see this thing, go into this medicine. If you want to see this, oh, it's not like that. We're just there. And whatever that is there is going to come up at any moment. You were saying something like, you would not recommend or have someone who has a stable life. But who knows, that person goes fully stable and then pops up the app, right? That you didn't even remember that was there.
Yeah.
Who knows? Or maybe someone very destabilized comes and then becomes enlightened. So like a little bit of devil's advocate.
Yeah, totally.
Because by the way, the definition of enlightenment in the Eastern traditions from the Western is like same behavior, but here it's called psychosis. I have the same behaviors of this person in the other side.
I would second the ability to understand those who are struggling mentally or mentally ill. Like now having that direct experience, that panya, right, in my body of like, oh my God, this is what it's like to become trapped inside of your own mind and how scary that feels.
I would say if you're unprepared to face that, don't go to Vipassana. Because I think 100% of people participating in this on one of the days will undoubtedly face that loop inside our own mind of like how scary it is to just become trapped in your own mind. And there's no way to project. I could have sat, before like that and tried to listen to us speak and try to imagine how that feels. And there's no way to project that how you're going to feel in that moment.
Yeah, no way.
Until you experience.
And on top of that, because we were not able to externalize it in any way, it was only here, and the thought was, in my case, going bonkers, right? And it would create loops and loops and loops and more loops. So my meditation was never in the here and now; it was somewhere else. Well, at some point, I told you girls that I realized how my mind was. It was basically had a butcher's knife that was stabbing myself with, while holding with bare hands the knife from the blade. So it's a double what that was being created. And at some point I had to just drop that shit. Hopefully now, and now I realize when I'm rubbing again the knife, and I'm rubbing again the knife, I'm like, okay, take it easy. So that was another moment for me that made me realize that, first of all, I am not the mind. The mind is this operating system that is faulty. That doesn't mean that the mind is wrong or right. I'm talking about the ego and BS, who cares? But I'm talking about algorithms that the mind has. In my case, the algorithm of memory, the algorithm of imagination. Because the intellect itself, which is this component that makes us so unique as a species, the intellect can be used for something that is in detriment to other people. And I have experienced it firsthand coming back from Vipassana. The intellect itself, right? But the intellect, something that at least worked for me during the retreat was maybe it was probably day 8 at this moment, but finally I was able to come back in the here and now, be a little bit more equanimous for longer periods of time, I should say. My intellect would start working, but from a very different angle, with a different flavor of thinking, a purer and more clear thinking. And therefore my decisions from that point on felt more in alignment with the body and everything. So that was beautiful. That was intellect that was pristine, that was functional, and not by craving, aversion, past or present. So that part was fascinating. And I remember many times I'm meditating, and simply I get into this state, and the idea comes as a realization of, obviously, it's like a thought or something I've been struggling with for days, and that makes. And then there's this.
Meaning insight into problems that you were stuck with.
In the problems that I created myself, probably that my mind created itself.
So you think you would just have because of that connection, you have a clearer channel to receive those insights, or what do you?
Yes, and at the same time, I will add on top of that the operational aspect. And I was telling you girls, right? We were meditating, and there is no technique of 4. It's like just become aware of your body sensation, period. Right? Because otherwise it would be to intellectualize the path to enlightenment. Mm-hmm. And so we're meditating, and remember that the posture of the body, it starts crunching as well, right? Well, we're meditating for that many hours. I don't know if you have this issue, but in my case, I had something pain here in the middle of the back and over here. Yeah. Then those were my 2 positions. Same? Yeah. So I realized, and this is funny that you were mentioning, right? There is this guy here that is coughing, sneezing, this other one is snoring, this other one is in my mind, I could hear Darth Vader, right? And my judgment algorithm was mouth breather. Gee, what an annoyance. So at some point I realized that, or this is my theory, that every emotion or mental construct has an associated breathing pattern. When someone is in panic, it's erratic, it is sharp, it's quickly right.
As a Nijay 9.
Yeah, you did that exactly. Yeah, when I saw your face, I like, oh man, yeah. Anyway, but the point is that also when we're relaxed, there is another breathing pattern. But even when we're sleeping, there's another breathing pattern. It could be adaptive, maladaptive, whatever. But many people will say, oh yeah, you need to breathe 5 seconds. You need 5 seconds. James Nestor is like, that's the optimal breathing pattern. And I agree with him very much. But that doesn't mean that that is a pattern that matches with equanimity. So that's when my theory came to fruition, which was, if I'm meditating in this position for this long, my mind is into equanimity. I noticed how there was very, very, very slow inhale, not even in depth. It was not even, it was shallow, a little more deeper than we normally. But there was a fraction of a pause and the longer exhale and a longer pause. And then another in, pause.
You're like co-regulating me right now.
Exactly.
Oh my God.
And so my nervous system started remembering that breathing pattern, that signature to come to equanimity. And that's something that now I'm doing, and my mind's getting clearer.
I'm having a light bulb moment right now as also someone who's very focused and attuned with the breath. Maybe the residual benefits to the nervous system that I'm still experiencing in that lowering of anxiety is that 10 days was such a profound amount of time to breathe in a calm and regulated way that I've rewired myself in that time. And now I'm still experiencing the benefits of that this week, where I am so calm and regulated that the notifications don't penetrate through that calmness. Whereas before the retreat and before such a deep rewiring process, as soon as a notification comes up, we get into that disrupted breathing pattern, right? And now actually the breathing pattern and the nervous system is so calm as a default that nothing will resilient break through that right now. And that's what I'm actually trying to maintain, is how do we not lose the progress that we gained? It's through continuing to breathe the same things that we always talk about with the belly, with the diaphragm, in a slow pattern through your nose, right? Maybe it's just that sheer volume of focus and of meditation that has proven this big shift in the body. And now that's like become my new normal, right? Like the new line of defense, where even though I've had my phone for the past week, I'm actually still not reacting to it in the same way that I would before.
Which is powerful. And an interesting aspect of that is the data. Like, I kept my Oura Ring data on, and though my resting heart rate was getting alarmingly low there, that has gone up a little bit, but my REM sleep is still doubled. Like the things that I'm seeing and like the difference of literally just physiological from a data standpoint have stood the test. Like they're still there, which makes me think, yeah, there's some type of deep rewiring that can happen in that amount of time.
Yeah. Wow. What should we conclude with on that note? I personally still don't know if I recommend it or I don't recommend it. I think the answer is it depends.
Let me ask this. Would you do it again?
You know, immediately during the retreat and immediately after, I was like, absolutely not. I am never, ever, ever, ever doing this again. I'm not recommending this to anyone. As time passes, as we have these integration conversations, you know, I see the benefits. It's just what Hannah said. Like, does it have to be so rough and so potentially destabilizing? Like, thankfully, we came out on the other end and we've made the most of it, and we're regulating and integrating and talking about it. And I guess I still worry about many others who might not have the same opportunity. And I don't know. I don't know if I would do it again. I would structure it. Maybe I would go through a non-Goenka retreat, because I do really struggle with him himself and the discourses. I would love to find a Buddhist retreat, a true Buddhist, potentially monastery retreat, you know, somewhere where I'm with, you know, I hate to say monks, but like people who devoted their life to studying this, so that I can engage with them in discourse. And of course, I'm going to keep meditating for the rest of my life, as I have been for the past 10 years now. You know, it's not meditation itself that I think is challenging or concerning. There's only, you know, really beneficial things that could come from that. So still on board with meditation.
So when you do the next meditation retreat, that's not the we need the comparison, because it goes with this theory of mine that the things that made it so miserable, if you take those out, I don't know if you get the same result. Like it's so I'm curious, and it's my curiosity that I was cursing myself for while I was in there. So I mean, I'm similar. I'm like,
Well, you guys will get the invite as soon as I find the next thing for us.
off the cuff, I would say absolutely not. I would not do that again. But I'm like, I can never say never because for me, I cannot project how I'm going to feel. But I say, if I say I'm going to do something like that again, look me in the eyes, like, you good now? Are you okay?
Shake
Are
me
you
up
sure?
a bit. Is Hannah in there?
At this moment, I would say no. And even going in, I had a feeling in my body, this is a once in a lifetime experience. However, maybe see you next time.
Interestingly, in my case, I was thinking, if none of the things that I'm doing were fine, if shit hits the fan, even worse, I would move to a monastery, like to become a monk. I was thinking about it.
I thought about it.
Very
Very
extreme.
You too?
Absolutely not.
Oh, really?
I'm enamored with
Well,
monk
I'm
lifestyle.
in there.
I was like, I don't want to be a monk. What am I doing? Absolutely not.
I would fully consider
I
it for
love
3 to 6 months.
Yeah, if you really love, and then that is if the worst case scenario would happen in my life ever, I would consider doing that. I was thinking about like exit scenarios, exit strategies from like into a monastery.
The question is, will they accept us?
Yes.
Well, Dina, I'll write you a letter of recommendation if you write me one for the monastery life.
Well, you got to complete on your Vipassana, so that's something to put into your resume.
This is hilarious.
The one of the things that before we close, it's the integration. That's something.
Yes, and we're fortunate to have gone together.
Yeah.
Because we have the shared experience to talk about it. I can't imagine having gone through this alone, which there are WhatsApp groups, I think, for every retreat center. And I think there's some opportunity to connect with past students who have gone through it.
Yeah.
But gosh, I really appreciate having gone through this with you guys and us being friends and living in the same city.
I will never forget as soon as we were able to talk and we connected and I hugged you and I started tearing. I will never forget that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah, same. And that car ride back, like, put me, that bridge from there, car ride back to Austin, I truly don't know what I would have done to just...
And the interest to Whole Foods was interesting.
You guys wandering around Whole Foods disillusioned, unsure of what you would like to eat.
First stop after we get into the city limits, we think it's a good idea to get groceries. And JJ and I walk in, and I equated it to the feeling if you've ever done psychedelics and you feel like you're just everyone else is kind of in a different movie than you, or like the people that are on your same wavelength. We walk in and we're just like, whoa.
Yeah, it was overwhelmed.
We are from a different planet.
Wow.
The sensory overload.
Social support, if we didn't already know it, following COVID and all the things, is absolutely critical to any transformational experience that you go through. This includes
And proximity and connection with other humans. For me, that is has been undeniable. That is how I operate. Period. I would like to know, to finalize from all of this adventure, what is your main takeaway?
Why didn't you tell us that was coming? I'm kidding. That's a very reasonable question. Wow. Do you have yours?
It's hard to say in this moment because, again, I feel like I'm still in the thick of the processing stage. Yeah, that feels really, really daunting.
I think my main takeaway is just how resilient we are as human beings, because never have I gone so far down the rabbit hole, whether in plant medicine, other transformational retreats, breath work, where I truly had the thought of, I'm not going to come out of this. And I did. I mean, that existential thought of like, I am irreparably in the depths of my psyche and I will never be the same. And I would say, you know, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, like the first 3 days back, were really challenging happiness wise, as in I did not feel happy whatsoever. I felt neutral at best, but I was fearing this loss of who I was and the good qualities about myself that I like. And maybe to your point, that reshuffling is necessary to an extent because you can't become someone new if you are clinging to who you've always been. But I think just knowing that that thought was so visceral of, oh my gosh, I'm not sure if this is good for me. I don't know if I'm going to be forever changed from the good qualities about me, to now realizing, no, you can come out even better on the other side of truly like any experience. That feels empowering right now.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, that's a big one for me too, of the just like what creates the most pain. I can't speak for the entire human race, but for myself would be the projection of the now onto the future, which is like, yeah, I'm never going to be the same. I'm never going to have my personality back. You know, like that is what created a lot of the suffering and of those loops to that point. I think what's like percolating in my integration process right now is this relationship to pain, and how going in, knowing in my intuition, I'm going here to access something in myself that can only be accessed through this portal, and not knowing what that would be, you know, kind of hoping, ooh, all these insights and ideas, and there was some of that, absolutely. But in order to get to that, it was first face all of your pain and completely break down kind of what you're saying, like you in just almost with what they would say is an ego death. I don't like that term, but just the dissolution of like who I am and my identity, and feeling so separate from that, and feeling faced with all of my pain, and that is a necessary part and the necessary portal to get to where I'm wanting to go, to get to the peace, to get to the creativity, the joy, you know, everything that's on the other side of that. A lot of times it really is through pain. And so just this like renegotiation of my relationship with pain so far in my process has been a really big,
Wow, thank you, Karen. And you'll have to stop me because so many ideas are coming to my mind. In my case, my identity fractured, as I mentioned. I think the number is 5 probably. I lost my mind twice. One of them was definitely that, looking at the mirror and this guy, like, who's this guy? Tripping. And then the other one was the mortality aspect. And so my takeaway is I don't have enough time. Or I should say, I have enough time to take action on things that really matter to me. And stop fooling myself with stories that I've created in the past that I have forgotten that I have created. And see reality the way it is, as it is. Knowing that reality is going to change.
Yeah.
Knowing that reality is going to change. All the bads are going to pass, and all the goods or highs are going to go. And it may sound a little bit robotic, or probably even lacking of emotion or attachment. And that's a funny part. I mean, in my life, I've been studying over the last at least 3-4 months attachment theory, and we went to a non-attachment theory concept. So I had both of those things like clashing with each other. And for me, even though I have not yet been able to extrapolate all the lessons, what I can tell is that the moment that I needed to make a decision that was so hard, the moment that we came back here to Austin, the moment we came back here, I did it completely with equanimity. Completely. Not creating, not aversion, not passing picture, right here, right now. And I made the decision, boom. And it felt like, okay, this is hard, but I will do it. And everything is going to pass after. So for me, the biggest lessons have been the notion of mortality or impermanence, and this equanimous mind from where I can access a better intellect and better emotion. I would say.
I love that. It's powerful.
Thank you so much, girls. Thank you not only for the podcast, but the entire adventure, or the entire how we packed up the car, the clown car, and everything.
I feel a little responsible for this because I feel like this is kind of my idea, and I rolled you into coming, and you were on board.
Because I was about to go ahead in 2020
Fair,
when
fair.
COVID hit.
But you wouldn't have had the idea.
No, a lot of us knew. Wow, it was meant to be that.
Yeah, we had. I thought it was a great, jolly idea going into it. It was going to be a real relaxing time. It is not.
Well, let's put an end to this episode. So for people to get to know more about you, Hannah, where can we find you on the net?
You can find me on Instagram at Hannah Grace Fish.
Okay, you hear that? And
And Sum of All Positive, SUM of All Positive, and that's on Instagram or sumofallpositive.com.
nice, thank you, Marina. And in honored to have this journey, these two beautiful ones, Mark. We learn that respect more and more every single day. And thank you so much, everyone, for indulging and listening to our rants and our enlightenments. I'm so happy that we're able to share this with our communities. We hope that this conversation provided a lot of insight, and at the same time, we invite you to ask questions individually or just place your comments down here. And feel free to share this with people that are interested in going to Vipassana, talk about it, to get them to know the insider information. With that being said, we really appreciate it. Hope to see you in the next episode of Optimizing. Keep learning, keep optimizing. See you soon, guys.